Oh, let's begin the show.
For Thursday, March 26th, 2020. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of tested.com. Hello and welcome to the podcast this week. We're back, not in the office, not in our studios. We're still at home, but the core podcasters are back. I'm here, Norm, joined by Jeremy Williams.
Hi,
Hey,
Norm Chan.
Haven't seen you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I've been here, though. I've been here.
And Kishore, good to see you again.
Hello.
Oh, how are you guys doing? This is the first time we've podcasted together in this format.
So I've been struggling with what is the appropriate question to ask people now? Like, because I always ask, how are you doing? And there's something about that feels like not the best question to ask at this moment. Or is it the best question to ask at this moment? I don't know.
It's the best question to ask. I mean, it's with the understanding that, of course, there's the underlying, oh yeah, I'm at home, dealing with the thing that we're all dealing around the world right now. But, how are you making use of that? And what's your general disposition?
I managed to respond to that question with a question mark yesterday because in the past, now 48 hours, I had water leak from an upstairs tub down through a downstairs ceiling, and our hot water heater stopped working.
Uh-oh.
So that was exciting.
Do you have a tankless heater? Or
Yes.
Oh,
So,
you have a
amazingly,
fancy, yeah.
the old turn it off, turn it back on trick actually did the trick for my hot water heater.
How does that work? Is there like a computer? Is there like a board that controls it?
Yeah. I literally had to turn it off and turn it back on.
Wow.
And the little digital display came back up, and it seemed to be working after that.
At least
the leaky tub does not reboot.
There's no turning that off and back on?
No.
How does it work now with shelter in place? Are like plumbers and other people still on call?
They're essential.
I would think so.
But they're getting less calls. So the guy who came to look at our tub, who's coming back today to actually finish the job, he said that his calendar has gone down 75%.
Wow.
That's so weird though, because everybody is home. So you would think and with all of the toilet paper that's being used, you would think there's backed up toilets everywhere across this nation.
They're very considerate too. They come wearing masks and gloves, and I think that they're just as careful as, even more careful than most people.
Still arriving 45 minutes late or on time?
Right on time. If you
right
get
on time.
Danny. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Very good. Well, sorry to hear about your house problems, but it's a good thing that you're home, that you can deal with that, and it's not
true.
like
it's true.
Like you're somewhere else and coming back and coming to a very stressed out household.
I felt like I'd reached level 2 of quarantine, the game.
Was there a moment where you were freaking out? Like, okay, if if the hot water heater did not turn back on because you have a tankless heater, and it's not like you have 50 gallons of reserve, right? That's already warmed up. That you would be deeper into the closer to the post-apocalyptic scenario.
Yeah, it's funny. Do you remember when we reviewed my car and I joked about how this heated steering wheel was the most joked about feature, but then turned into a wonderful feature?
Yes.
We have a similar feature in our kitchen, which is an instant hot water valve. So my wife can make tea in a moment. She doesn't have to heat water. It's just automatically always hot. So that was going to be how we were going to take tubs. We were going to fill a bucket with that and then dump it into cold water until it got lukewarm. So we had a backup plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my kid would have been like, I'll just take a bath sometime in April. It'll be cool.
No, the kids were totally fine with this. Yeah, no problem.
Oh, all right. Well, glad to hear that, it's not quite disastrous over there. Kishore, things are going okay to you. I know you've been doing a lot of Zoom calls.
Yeah, too many Zoom calls. So does Ripley get on your Zoom calls? Because
No,
my
we
cat
don't let
Sky
her
gets
down.
on.
Yeah,
No,
no.
my
She
cat
doesn't.
Sky is on half of my Zoom calls.
Well,
Like I
it's
locked her
a
out of
cat.
the office this morning, and so pretty much in like another 20 minutes she'll be clawing to get in. But she just jumps into every Zoom call, and I gotta say, pets on Zoom calls, I'm kind of on board with.
Hey, I think our numbers would go way up. You got to let that cat in here.
What about your cat, Jeremy? Your cat?
Jojo has been on my kids' Zoom school feeds, which is awesome because the kids can finally kind of share their pets with each other virtually. But no, Jojo kind of keeps to herself, so she probably won't be up here.
Yeah,
Besides which, she's locked out of my office.
Yeah.
Plus, Jeremy doesn't like his own cat, so like, let's not. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, she knows that.
Well, it's good to see your faces. This will be how we're hoping to be podcasting for the foreseeable future. It's working so far. Last week with Will Gaston. I think we're still figuring out the dynamic of what it means to do this type of podcast. But we're going to try to make it as normal as possible. Although the news definitely has been skewing less toward the technology side, or at least everything kind of is, talking about still COVID-19. We're still going to find ways to distractions and ways to try to have a relatively normal conversation and normal life in these not so normal times. But without further ado, it is the week that everyone's been waiting for, that we've been waiting for maybe 13 years now, even though we didn't know it. But at least since last, November when it was announced. But Half-Life Alyx is out, and so that is our top story. I don't know if we can get a musical cue to play, but I'm just going to insert it right here. It is
the top story this week.
That's exactly it, Jeremy. So on Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific sharp, Half-Life Alyx started unpacking, decoding on Steam systems worldwide. And reviews dropped around that time, ours as well. People are doing live streaming. I'll throw out some numbers. I think at some point we saw on Steam 43,000 people concurrently playing a game, playing Half-Life Alyx.
That's a new record for VR, right?
It's far and away a record. Yeah. I think previous record was held maybe by Boneworks at 8,000 or so.
And who had Beat Saber.
Exactly. Beat Saber was like 5,000 or so.
Yeah.
And these are concurrent users, which gives us a little bit of an indication as to the user base. I mean, if there's any game that will give us numbers as to how many people actually own VR headsets or are playing VR on a regular basis, a lot of people may have bought a Gen 1 Rift that may not have bought Alyx because they bought it and it's sitting in the corner, but at least 43,000 people, and presumably way more than that, have bought the game. And so that's a pretty big user base.
How much is that number skewed by what's happening right now? If we took away this moment, do you still think it's like such a massive hit based on what you're hearing that it would be like 5,000 concurrent users or even 20,000 concurrent users?
Day one, absolutely. I mean, it's a single-player game. I think a lot of people were worried about being spoiled, and there are plenty of spoilers, which we won't talk about on this podcast, as to how the game ends, the plot developments, even some of the combat encounters, and some of the places you get to go in the game. I think people wanted to go in fresh. I know, Jeremy, you wanted to go in fresh. Aside from watching the 3 videos that Valve had put out, I don't think you read or saw much, right?
I kind of wish I hadn't watched. I kind of wish I hadn't watched those videos because I'm actually, I guess, about halfway through the game, and I still haven't gotten to one of those scenes. And
so you're waiting for them.
Well, yeah, and I kind of know that it's coming, and a part of me expected all of those scenes to be from the first chapter, the first couple hours.
That's not true. You've definitely seen one of those scenes.
No, not the Combine one.
You've seen the one that they showed. The blink, the one where you look up and the thing opens up.
Yes. Yeah, I saw
Seen that one. Yeah,
but
yeah,
I haven't.
You haven't seen all of them.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
But yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to know anything about the story, and I have been surprised. I've been sufficiently surprised. Man, what a just talking aesthetically, what a beautiful game. I mean, what a beautiful game.
Well, let's talk about the game, right? We're going to talk about your impressions, Jeremy. I haven't heard from you really.
Yeah.
What your experience has like been so far. I've been watching some of Will's live streams. Will Smith live streamed 2 times this past week, going through it, and it's been really fun to see how he's tackled some of the puzzles. Just his reactions to some of that world, the world building. But the immediate reaction is, I think from a lot of people, is this is one of the best looking and most fully fleshed out VR worlds they've seen so far. Would that be accurate for your impressions?
I mean, yes. It's not the only one. It's not the only fleshed out world, I would say, in VR. But in terms of, it is probably the most just aesthetically finished. It is, and both visually and auditorially. I mean, it is the sound design in this game, I think, should win all the awards. It's absolutely stunning work on this part of the sound designers.
It's spatial sound. There's also great music that comes in at certain encounters, tense moments, when you're ready to get into a fight. And it's City 17. I don't think it's a spoiler to say you're in City 17 5 years before Half-Life 2. That's City 17, that Eastern European city look. Like, I know it's not a photogrammetry environment, but there are some places where it does look like they just scanned a city street and found textures.
The opening shot of the game, I watched your playthrough video. The opening shot of the game where you just see that sort of central citadel is so overwhelmingly beautiful. And for months, I've been listening to you guys talk about you got to get the index for this. You got to get the index for this. And I was like, come on, that's so expensive, blah, blah, blah. I get it now. Seeing the resolution inside of the game, I finally have wrapped my head around why you've been talking about that as being such an important component of this.
And well, I think the sound 100%. The Rift S, I think the game looks really great in that. It's going to run better on most people's computers because it only needs to be at 80 hertz and the resolution isn't as high. And so you can do super sampling if you have a really good computer. What you do lose out is the really nice integrated audio. So if you're playing on a Rift S, if you're playing on an Oculus Quest, wear headphones. Get a good pair of headphones. Put them in. The Deluxe Audio head strap headphones are totally good, but don't play with the built-in piped audio that the Rift S has because you'll be missing out on a lot of the experience. That first level, that first opening scene, you can tell they really stacked the level of interactivity and detail just in that first 20 minutes before you get your gravity gloves, because they knew people, whether it's veteran VR users or new to VR users, first-time VR users, they were going to be spending a lot of time just rummaging around, interacting. There are so many little Easter eggs I'm sure you've seen the videos, the GIFs of people using the markers. There are dry erase markers that you can write on windows. You can write on the CRT monitors. There are people who are just doing diagrams. There's a science teacher who's teaching physics captured in game, drawing on the windows of Half-Life Alyx. Those systems are exactly what VR is so compelling at, because it's how you expect the real world to work. And when you have something like a marker that you're drawing, on the glass, you can do it in something like Rec Room, but then you're also looking through the glass and you're seeing City 17 in the background. That is so cool.
Yeah, and the very opening scene, I think the very opening scene on the balcony, I think I must have spent 10 minutes out there just exploring all the little objects and adjusting the knob on the radio, and seeing what I could tune in and trying to discover little Easter eggs. It seems like the station that it's on already is broadcasting some kind of code. It's so much, and I hadn't actually made the connection that there's that whole period before the gravity gloves where you really are touching things. And once you get the gloves, it's much more remote, and you're sort of force powering things into your hand. But they do maximize that period beforehand really smartly.
Yeah, they have, even when you're walking down this apartment building, getting to Russell. They populate, like they have pictures on the wall that you can adjust. They have lots of just objects, more so than I think in later levels. I think they're really judicious about the density of objects in levels. I don't know if you've noticed, like later on, yes, you're still in hallways and rooms, and there are things to open, but it's not like there are dozens of objects in every single room. They're placing them in places where they know that people are going to spend time.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we allowed to say anything negative?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I mean, okay, I looked at like I did the review, and we don't give scores out, right? Like we posted a review. It's very glowing. It's I think I did it for in a way to speak to people who were maybe on the fence about picking up VR headsets, try to convey what VR brings to a Half-Life game. And I would say, the game absolutely succeeds as a VR game, pushing the boundaries in a lot of places in VR, and also some places where it holds back. But the big surprise was that it's also a fantastic Half-Life game. I think that was the bigger surprise for me. That's a very satisfying, not just chapter, because if I call it a chapter in the Half-Life series, it feels like episode 1 or episode 2, but it feels like this is a full-fledged, full-length Half-Life game that's well worth the $60 you're spending on it if you don't have the index and didn't get it for free. But the scores, they're like 10 out of 10s in a lot of places. I looked on Metacritic, and I think PC Gamer gave it a 93, and I think that's where I would kind of, if I had to, if someone's like, please give it a score, what would you rate it out of 100? It would be about a 92, 93 for me. And one of the places where it's not, and I reviewed games and you reviewed games for PC Gamer, way back, Jeremy. And I remember having to make that distinction, like what is a 93% game versus a 95 or a 97% game. And I reviewed Orange Box. I honestly don't even remember what the score I gave it, but I think it was in the higher 90s, because it was
that got one review.
TF2. Yeah, that was one score at PC Gamer. That was Will and I have had many conversations about that, because he reviewed it for Maximum PC, and he gave it, I think, a 9 instead of a 10. And the reason he gave it a 9, I've given him shit for this for over 10 years now, is because he thought that episode 2 was the weak point of that package. And episode 2 brought down the score because it wasn't as good to him as TF2 and Portal 1. And I'm like, it's still a box of gold. You have one piece of silver, if you want to call it that, but that's still a 10 out of 10 for me. And I gave Orange Box a high 90s score. But I think Half-Life Alyx is a low 90s score for me, because there are places where I do think they held back.
It looks like you gave it a 92, by the way.
If you look on, is that the UK score?
It might be.
That might be the UK score.
It's on
I actually don't even have the issue. I know. I think that's the Tom Francis review. They've wiped out all of my contributions, all the US side.
I bet it's on archive.
Maybe. Yeah. I'll have to look it up.
So when I say, can we say anything negative, I didn't mean is tested allowed to. I meant, like, are we as internet citizens allowed to? Because there is so much love out there for it right now, and I feel like there's not a whole lot of people.
Just say it. Just say what you don't like.
But it's a very personal thing. Like, if I was reviewing it for PC Gamer or anybody else, I would probably side with Norm and give it a 90s score, somewhere in the 90, 94, right? Because it's a stunning achievement. It's a great game. It is perfect at what it does. I've discovered that I don't know if I want to play a first-person shooter, in VR. Maybe that's not what I want from the VR medium. That's something that I like from flat screens. First of all, I'm kind of angry at the game for being so scary. It is so scary. Like, my son was asking me if he could play it, and I told him it's tremendously frightening at times. And he said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how scary? And I said, it's a 10. Like
9.2.
It is a really, really scary game at times, and that's just what you get from virtual reality. Like, it has the power to immerse you in dark spaces and give you the sense of fear.
But you can't turn your head away. You can't close your eyes. Closing your eyes actually makes it even scarier
Sure.
Because you're still in headset and you open your eyes and the head crab might be there.
And you talk about all these aesthetic, achievements that they've made. All of those are applied to horror at times in a way that becomes very visceral and frightening.
I don't want that to push people away. I think that you said you're halfway through the game. It's 11 discrete chapters in the game, levels, and I think you're on arms race right now, I want to say.
Okay.
If I have pegged that correctly, 2 levels later, you're going to hit the part of the game where it is straight up horror. I wouldn't consider where you are so far horror. I would consider it thrilling and with horror elements, but you haven't even hit the truly scary part of the game. Are you going to not finish this?
Now that you've told me that, I don't know. I'm gonna finish it. But for those moments where I'm in the dark using my flashlight, I don't know if what I'm experiencing is called enjoyment. I'm just getting through it because I don't like when I die and I have to replay it. It's like I'm not enjoying it as much as I have some other virtual reality games. And the thing that I really I've always said this from VR. The thing that I like the most is locomotion and innovative locomotion. I think the Echo games are still like the best locomotion I've experienced and it allows me to do something I've never been able to do in flat screen games, which is have a sense of weightlessness and float around and grab the walls and fly around. And the locomotion that you have in Alyx, for all of its stunning achievements, it's still very traditional flat screen, moving around the ground. And you have 2 options. You have smooth locomotion and you have teleport. And neither one is like tremendously innovative or thrilling or in any way like giving me a sense of moving through the world that I enjoy. Like that actual sense of moving through the world, like just walking. I think in VR should be something that's compelling and like gives you some sort of sense that you don't get from another video game medium.
But you're also talking about an inherent limit of the type of game they've made, right? A game with gravity, right?
Yes.
Anytime you have a game with gravity in VR, you're not going to be able to walk the way you want to walk in the real world. It's why games like Phantom Covert Ops is, it's the kayaking game.
Exactly.
You're on water, and that's an interesting locomotion mythology to get away, or it's technically a kind of a cockpit game, right?
Yep.
So if you're not in a cockpit game and you're not in 0G like you are in the Lone Echo games, you're going to have to be, or doing a web slinging kind of windlands. Yeah, windlands, right? Those are really innovative ways. But the moment your feet are planted on the ground, no one's solved that yet.
Or Jet Island, I think, is another example. And this is speaking very personally because I know clearly, seeing the reviews, there are people who want to play straight-up first-person shooters in VR, and that's great. This is there for them, and everybody should play it. Even if you're on the fence like me, you should still totally play it because it's incredible. But it's not my favorite VR game ever made, and I just want to make that distinction.
What about the interactions? Let's talk about the gravity gloves, because this is where I do feel like they put out so much time and energy into making something that was technically difficult feel so intuitive and so right, and does enhance the way you interact with the world, and also compensates for some of the kind of limitations of VR locomotion, like the fact that as close as you can get to, a corner of a room, you don't want to ask someone to have to walk into the corner physically or teleport into every nook and cranny, because that can feel exhausting, right?
Yeah.
It's still a video game, right? In the same way that in Half-Life 2, developers have talked about when they added physics, you're still moving at a much faster walk speed or run speed than a real person would. And when Valve put on real physics on the character ragdoll on Gordon Freeman, players would die just by walking in the walls because of the momentum, right? In video games, unless you're playing a stealth game, they have to cheat, time and distance, right? And in VR, it's tougher to do that because you're not going to ask someone to physically walk down a hallway, because then the game would take 20 hours or 30 hours just to get through one building. And so the gravity gloves are shortcuts. They make the world a little bit smaller.
Yes, and I think super smartly. And they feel fun. Like the thing that I don't think you get from watching the videos is something you've reiterated, which is that you still have to catch things.
Yeah.
You flick them towards you, but if you don't catch them, they just drop at your feet. So you still have to kind of grab things, and that mechanic is consistently fun. I really enjoy it. They did a great job with that.
Yeah, and it's not an offensive weapon, which I think goes to one of my criticisms of the game in places that they held back, and they've addressed this. People have asked them, why is there no melee? I think if you read and you listen to some of the feedback from people who've beat the game, right? The big criticisms are there's no running or jumping, right? In terms of locomotion, you're walking. It's a measured pace, and that's very conscious design decision. There's no melee combat. You can hold physics objects that become essentially obstacles and barriers, and the zombies can throw things at you, but there's no offensive way to. There's no interaction between those physics objects in a way that feels real, like you're stabbing, pinning something to a wall or something, right? And then what was my third? And then there's no recoil, right? In terms of the weapons, it's everything is your hand model is always locked in, which is tied to kind of the same reason they didn't have a two-handed weapon, because they didn't want the game model to break from where you felt like your hands actually were, right? Those are all three ways of kind of playing it safe. And I think they did that, one, because they knew a large number of people playing this game would be new VR users, and those would be very kind of advanced or maybe uncomfortable solutions. And two, because VR has inherent limitations in haptics. And also, like, not everyone's going to be holding the same type of controller to make those elements feel good. What did you think about the barnacles and the fact that they lifted you up, but did it give you that feeling that you wanted?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
If that was a last minute ad, I'm grateful for it. What's interesting is I switch between smooth locomotion and teleport frequently. Blink.
Not in the menu, right? You're using smooth, but you're pulling the thumbstick back to teleport?
Well, actually, sometimes I just turn on straight up teleport because I don't like that feature of smooth, that when you pull back, I'm constantly hitting that accidentally by going when I turn. But sometimes I just feel like the game, like you were saying, it's intentionally paced slowly, but you can move through the world faster if you teleport. And so I tend to do that a lot. I got sidetracked. I forgot your question.
Did you feel like not being able to jump, or like did you feel like when you went from like, did you feel like you were a little floaty, I guess?
I definitely wanted to sprint, and that's probably why I'm using teleport. But I don't think I ever necessarily wanted to jump. No, I did wonder though. I did wonder about the sprint if you can't sprint because of the whole debacle with the Knuckles controllers and clicking that analog stick in isn't possible for some people while you're facing forward.
Right. Even though that's a problem, I think it's largely solved with the newer hardware. I don't think it was a hardware thing. I think it was a 100% a pace thing. Like they wanted the combat to play out a certain way and not let people sprint around the combat. And you could tell with the ways the levels are designed.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of big open environments. There are like bigger arenas, and if you think of combat as being a small like 1v1 type Quake style arena, they have a few of those, but it's not a battlefield.
Yeah,
you're not going around entire buildings to flank. You're
right.
going around a couple cars, trash can, or it's mostly in hallways.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, the combat is it's fantastic. It's really fulfilling. I do wonder how it would feel with more enemies. And I also wonder I can't help but think how fun the game would be to play co-op.
Yeah, even like kind of like a horde mode, like a 2-player or 3-player horde mode. That's something I know multiplayer isn't easy in VR, especially when we're talking about adding physics objects and having all the data needs to go back and forth. But reduced number of physics objects. I think they said like up to 80 objects they have in each level, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. If you count the number of like bottles and cans and things in cupboards, like 80 is actually a lot per level. But if you reduce that, and let's say just like a dozen or so of things that you can move around, and they're mostly exploding barrels or something, then I would love to see co-op using the pistol mechanics and using the reload, because I think that's the other place where they put a lot of effort into making that feel right. The two-handed reload and the UI on the side of the pistol. So, you have to be smart about in the heat of the moment when to reload and not getting caught off guard and being out of ammo.
What do you think about the what is the thing that you're collecting throughout the game?
The resin.
What do you think about that system? Because I don't remember Half-Life being a collection game.
I think they lean into it as a way to encourage discovery, in addition to ammo. And the ammo placement and the ammo density is, from what I understand, dynamic. So they always, I don't know if there's an upper cap on ammunition, right? It's definitely like your indicator on your HUD, on your Russell gloves, is 3 digits only. So I don't know if anyone's got over, 1,000 bullets on the pistol before, and what happens when that. But I think the game measures how much ammo you've been using and always wants to make you feel like, and again, depending on your difficulty settings, always wants to make you feel like you're on your last 4 magazines, always. And so you can't just unload freely at every single, corner, because they want to encourage you to be judicious with your fire. So the resin, I liked it. I think I felt like I got most of the resin, and then even by the end, this isn't a big spoiler, but it's a very classic video game trope where you reach an upgrade station and you hear the NPCs say, well, this might be a great place to do all your upgrades. I don't know how much more you'll have. And you realize, okay, we're nearing the end game. This is the time to use all your resin. And I wasn't able to upgrade every single wedon't
so your choices mattered, yeah.
So your choices matter, and that's why my second playthrough, I chose things differently. Don't choose the laser sight if you want harder, more I think more rewarding experience for some of the firefights.
That's funny. You told me that in chat, and as soon as I realized how scary the game was, I went straight for laser sight.
Oh, and it's so much easier now, right? You don't have to look down the barrel.
No, that's true. I'm good.
I think it fundamentally changes the combat, and I think if you do laser sight on just one of the guns, pick either the SMG or the pistol, and then try to use the reflex sight on the other one. I think you'll find it maybe more enjoyable down the line, the second half of the game.
Okay.
But that's personal preference. You could also play it in story mode. Have you considered lowering the difficulty?
I did consider it, but I haven't resorted to that yet.
That was quite the shot he just took at you. Have you considered lowering the difficulty?
Have you considered playing it in story mode?
I think before
maybe your son would have better luck on this game than you.
I think before I turned 40, I would have been insulted by that. But no, I'm fine with that. That's fine.
And the physics objects also. There are videos of people who've done things like collect grenades and put them in bins.
Oh, right? Nice. Yeah.
Because the inventory system is another way they design. It's a restriction, right? You have 2 of these wrist slots where you can put grenades or the stim packs, or I guess those are the only 2 things. There's one more thing later on you could also put in there.
You could put a little health worm in there.
Yes, you could also put the wall health worm in there. But basically, you can only have a certain number of things. You can only hold 2 grenades in there and maybe 1 on your offhand if you want to carry that many. And that's to restrict and also to make the later combat more interesting, because you have to conserve your ammo and be judicious. But people have been finding trash bins and wooden crates and throwing grenades in there. And it shows the limitation of, compute power of how taxing the physics objects are. I think there's a video of someone who has maybe 24, maybe more grenades in a wooden box, and the moment he tries to pick it up, the game crashes. All of those grenades are trying to interact with each other and collide with each other, and it's not a simulation. There are simulated elements, but it's not a full-on simulation.
I wonder if that's fixed in today's patch. Did you see they released 1.1?
I think what's added is smooth turning. which I think was a bug. Smooth turning was supposed to be in there at launch. There's an option to turn off the snap turning.
Now, I'm curious, do they mean actual smooth turning, which would make most people nauseous, or do they mean like they add movement to the snap?
It is actual smooth turning.
Yikes!
Yeah.
Do you have a sense there are a lot of other patches coming soon, or is this just like a one-time thing?
I mean, I'm sure there are going to be bugs. It's one of those things where they don't know how people are going to play the game, and because there are so many physics objects, because you can take things from one level to the next level. You know, in past games, what is it? The gnome that you brought, right, in Portal from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, and you got an achievement for that. Like, these are things that people are going to futz with and want to play with and do speeds runs with. And so I think they're going to patch to make sure that the game doesn't crash when people want to do those fun things. I think what's probably slated for them next is, also a much needed vacation, but putting out the SDK and the map making tools. And in fact, we could say now we actually have an interview with the Valve team that we did last week. No spoilers in that either, but we'll be playing that at the end of the show. We're going to chat with Robin Walker and Corey Peters, who's a level designer at Valve, about Alyx, and they talk about what their next steps are. I don't think they're going to add multiplayer. I think that, it's kind of sad. They said, they confirmed Left 4 Dead 3 is not something they're working on for VR, and that was my personal hope. But I hope they do, experiment and tinker with what VR multiplayer could mean, because that's where the three of us have had the most fun, right? Like, and what would a Rec Room style quest be like with the Source 2 engine, with Half-Life Alyx mechanics and visual assets?
Well, someday,
super fun.
Someday somebody will patch, hack Half-Life Alyx to be co-op, and I'll replay it with you guys. I think the scary parts would be a lot less scary then. So sign me up.
I think they put Russell in your head to mitigate, right? And we haven't talked about that yet, right? Like the Alyx, you talk like you muttering, Alyx muttering to herself at certain moments alleviates tension.
Yes.
Right. The kind of silent cursing that you do, and you doing it yourself alleviates tension. Like, there are moments, you've played past this part, but there's a new enemy that's really great for VR. It's like a stingray character, like a new type of head crab, and they escalate. They introduce it to you, show you its abilities. You have to kill it, and then they escalate and elevate that combat where you're fighting more of one of those. It's fair to say, and that's a place where I died so many times. And, once I knew that that's what they're going to do, I'm like, I'm cursing out loud, and I'm like super frustrated, but I'm doing that to relieve the tension. And the game does, and has ways to kind of, pace not only the combat, but pace the number of encounters so that there are moments of rest where you can just kind of take it in.
I think that is one of the most brilliant aspects of the game design, and it probably is one of the parts that took the least technical effort. It just shows their insight into what makes people comfortable in VR. It goes back to the first time that I used the Vive, at the Valve booth at one of the GDCs, and I put the headset on. It's the first time I'd done VR, and I put the headset on, and suddenly I was isolated, and I heard the voice of one of the Valve developers come over my headset, and I was completely put at ease, because it felt like the voice of God, or that I wasn't alone anyway. And
Jeremy, this is a known issue.
It's what it is. It's the VR equivalent of the Nintendo game counselors. Do you remember that whole system way back when Nintendo had a 1-900 number? It was a 1-900 number that you could pay. And there are YouTube videos for this, where they give you a tour that's like a call center, and you have these experts that would have literally manuals for the game, and you would tell them where you were stuck in Zelda, and they would say, okay, have you tried this block? They would give you game hints. Right, and this is before internet, clearly, before game facts and before game guides were a thing. But you could pay per minute. Presumably as a kid, ask your parents for permission and call a 1-900 number and hear a reassuring voice of a game counselor walk you through the stressful moments of playing Mario or Zelda or Metroid. And maybe that's what VR needs. right? It needs a service, a Discord, where you can dial in and have someone who's a VR expert pipe in and watch you stream and talk you through the scary moments. It's okay.
But the game leans into that. Like, it acknowledges that. It does, because Alyx says in those moments where she enters the dark chambers, "Can you just talk to me, Russell? Just say anything."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's super smart. I love that aspect. Plus the humor they brought from the Portal franchise. And I just think that mix of reassuring voice and humor, that levity is so necessary to that game, and I love that aspect.
At the same time, I think they also employ it to make the game scarier, because there are moments where your connection with Russell is intentionally cut off and the radio breaks and you're like, oh, now I really feel alone. And now I know the next 15 minutes or half an hour or the next part of this level is going to be more intense intentionally by design. Kishore, you haven't played it yet?
No, I don't have the necessary specs, and I haven't bought the Index or Rift S yet.
You have a Quest, right?
I have a Quest. Like, I could do it, but I feel like watching some of the early playthroughs, watching Will stream, this is a game that, like, the extra bit of resolution, the better sound, like, that's worth it for this. And like, I'm only gonna, like, there's a first time to playing this game, and from what everyone is saying, yourselves included, this is the best VR game yet. And so if that's the case, like, I want to play it right. So I haven't plunked down the money for it yet, but I want to emphasize the word "yet" there.
And it's one of those games where I think even if you watch someone doing a live stream and if you've memorized the level structure, right? It being in headset is such a different experience than watching someone play it on flat screen. Like, your own fight or flight, lizard brain, just these primal reactions to something lunging at you and you hearing something eerie around a corner or going into a dark room. That's something that can't be replicated by watching a live stream.
You can't get the haptics of feeling your hands against the wall or crushing a can or, having your helmet stolen by a barnacle. You
got to find that rat too.
Oh, does that happen with the barnacles if you wear a helmet?
Yeah.
They don't take you up?
This is something when I went to play test it back in late November, I put on the helmet, right? So it's one of the first things they show your construction site, and there's everyone puts on the helmet. I think like 9 out of 9 players put on the helmet, and fewer people can put on, like, you put on the traffic cones too, and it covers your vision. And there are buckets you can put in your head, and they definitely cover your vision. These are all like fun little Easter eggy things. When I played it through, the barnacle, it was like an extra piece of health because the barnacle would grab your head. And the funny thing is, you see it pop into your field of view a little bit, but sometimes you don't notice that it's taken your helmet off, that you walk past a barnacle and then you walk through another barnacle thinking you're safe, and then it'll get you.
Yeah.
But in the earlier build, as of November, the barnacles weren't eating the helmets. They would spit them out. And so I would kill the barnacle, it would spit it out, and I'd be able to use that helmet just as an extra piece of health. And they fixed that, so you can only use it the once.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I did not know that. I now I regret leaving the helmet.
No. I mean, there are helmets throughout the game too.
Yeah.
Like there are blue ones. There are yellow ones. Did you see the respirators? They're N95s.
I did see those. Do they do anything?
I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Oh.
Next time you're in it, try putting your hand over your mouth.
Okay.
Because you can cover your mouth.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's another like VR thing, right? It's not remember those VR games that use the microphone to detect your breath, right? They would put you in a cold environment, and when you talk, right, it would then show your exhale, right? The game doesn't quite do this because there isn't that same environment, but the fact that you can hold your hand in front of your mouth is kind of neat, and you'll have to see where it goes.
I'm just excited about Alyx becoming like the new collaborative whiteboard tool with their incredible whiteboard mechanics.
Yeah.
So this is more than a game. It's a productivity tool if you really think about it.
Yeah, at $60, it's a steal.
Is there anything more we want to say about it? Because we're not going to go into spoilers, story stuff. There's a lot of story stuff toward the end. I want you to finish it, Jeremy. Sure, I don't know if you don't care, but at some point, I guess we'll have to talk about the ending and talk about the second half and those levels.
Okay. Yeah, maybe in a VR minute sometime.
Yeah. But if you've been playing it, if you're one of the hundreds of thousands of people who own the game, let us know how you've been enjoying it. Or if you're someone who doesn't have a VR headset and you've been watching streams and you have questions about it, or we just want to know what's your take. Obviously, a lot of people are disappointed because it's not on a system that they have, and there is monetary investment you have to make to buy a VR headset, even though you can get one for like $250 or $300 right now. That's fine to play this game on. But have the reviews and have any of the live streams or videos on YouTube convince you to pick this game up? Or are you just going to wait till someone hacks it and makes it a flat screen game? Because I assume that's going to happen at some point. Someone's going to make it compatible with keyboard, mouse, and you have to abstract all the interactions by pressing R and E and T and F.
Wow. I can't imagine how you would do that for the puzzles.
I don't know either, but I'm sure someone will solve it. Either come up with a way where it's I don't know, because the puzzles are procedural. It's a good question.
You need two mice or something. I don't know. That's weird.
Well, it's the same as there's a one-handed game mode too, right? So for those, you could solve the puzzle with one hand.
Have they finished that?
Yeah, it came out on release. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah, it makes it a little harder. And in fact, I'm curious what someone like our friend Dan Amrick, what one eye feels like, playing the game without stereo. Yeah. Because the puzzles also work better with stereo, VR having 3D as a native feature to it.
He has two eyes. He just has one lazy one.
Yes. Okay. But what? Yes. Sorry, Dan. All right, so we'll come back and revisit Alyx at a later time. That is our top story, and we do have an interview with Valve toward the end of the show. But before we continue on to the next segment, I want to let you know that this episode of This Is Only a Test is made possible with support from Microsoft. Right now, companies, governments, and pretty much any organization are being stalked by cyber criminals, and at some point, when the time is right, they will be successfully attacked by malicious actors seeking money, retribution, or political gain. Afternoon Cyber Tea with Ann Johnson provides insights for CISOs and key security decision makers who want to empower themselves with information to ward off cyber attacks and the disruption they cause. Each week, Ann Johnson, Corporate Vice President for Cyber Security Solutions at Microsoft, talks with the nation's top cybersecurity thought leaders and influential experts about what they're seeing and doing. She and her guests cover topics like election and national security, diversity in the cyber industry, and how a culture of information sharing is one of the best defenses. Join Ann to explore the risk and promise of tools and systems powered by AI, IoT, machine learning, and other emerging technologies. Get ideas for strategies that can head off intrusions from malware to the man in the middle. Afternoon Cyber Tea is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast One. Subscribe today and thank them for sponsoring this week's episode. All right, here is the pop culture. Yeah, I assume we're gonna add the sound in post. We're good, right? We're good. All right. What have you guys been watching and spending your time on at home? Anything?
So I've made some mistakes. I'm going to start with the mistakes before I get to the good stuff.
Okay.
I've been trying to follow the trends, so I watched Love is Blind on Netflix.
Oh.
And then I'm watching I started that weird tiger show.
The Tiger Netflix. Show. Tell us about the Tiger Show.
No. It's deeply disturbing, and it takes a lot of turns. It is like a how would you describe it? Like a murder mystery with like
true crime, right?
Yeah, it's a true crime show wrapped with this like very bizarre character. Like he's so bizarre that he occurs as a character out of like a terrible early 90s movie, like mullet, lame, clothing, just like bizarre affect, like and he's like hyper delusional. It is really bizarre and unsettling. Have you started watching that?
No, that's
don't
something
watch that.
I think there are members of my household that are intrigued by it, but they will probably watch it without me because I
Okay,
really don't.
so those are the mistakes I made. But the things we did is my 9-year-old hasn't seen a lot of the epic series, movie series of our lifetimes all the way through. So the first week we watched all the Lord of the Rings movies, including the slog through the Hobbit movies. And he's like now this massive Lord of the Rings fan. Then we did all the Harry Potter movies in a row. So we've been just trying to watch like different movies every night. I think we're going to transition to Pixar movies. That's like the real kind of like heavy duty stuff we've been watching. But really, I've been doing a lot of YouTube rabbit holes. So are you on like the Marble Run stuff? Jelly's Marble Runs? What? This is the best. So my kid's been watching this for a while. There's this channel, Jelly's Marble Runs, that hosts these just marble races where they're literally just marbles going down tracks, like indoor and outdoor tracks. And they have these incredible graphic overlays, and they're timed, and then they're narrated by this guy. I think his name's Greg Woods, who treats it as if it's like a NASCAR race or like a track meet. And it's so beautiful and it's mesmerizing. And in a time without sports, it's like the best thing ever for if you need a sports fix. And they just started a series. Instead of Formula One, it's called Marbula One. And so they have different like Grand Prix style races. It sounds really, really ridiculous, but it's the most enjoyable zone out and thing that I've come across.
That's funny that you mentioned the lack of sports. It reminded me that the Twitch's biggest pinball streamer, who goes by the name of Deadflip, has been wearing like football stuff underneath his eyes, lines, and streaming every day and asking ESPN to host him instead because he's doing it. He's doing it every day.
Well, we'll talk about this, I think, maybe in tech, but Fox Sports is doing the same thing with Formula One for racing, right? I've been watching more traditional television. Disney Plus is getting a lot of play in our households. We are in that age now. We've caved to showing the baby, who is at a year and a half, Disney films, and it's a lot. We alternate between the animated and the live action Beauty and the Beast, almost on nonstop rotation.
Oh, you've moved on from Moana. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So animated Beauty and the Beast, live action Beauty and the Beast, back and forth and back and forth, and so that's during the daytime between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's on our house nonstop. It's probably going on right now.
Wow, I've never seen the live action one that has Hermione, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And Luke Evans from the Hobbit films. He's in that one as well.
Have either of you tuned into a bunch of the live streams that are going on?
Yes, obviously Adam is doing live streams. He's doing them Tuesdays and Thursdays, just building stuff from the cave, doing some model kit building.
That is the weirdest meditative stream to watch because like you're just there will be moments where he'll be silent, just like fiddling with some little thing for minutes on end. So it's something you can totally have on the background. It's weirdly enjoyable.
I think it's hanging out, right? It's what live streams are really great for. It's not the same type of chat interaction you get with like a Twitch stream, but Adam's figuring it out, and I think it's just as meditative for him as well to have that stream of consciousness while he's building, and it's a really accurate reflection of what it's like to hang out in the shop in the cave when Adam's working on a project during a one-day build filming.
What is his tech setup for that? And did anybody help him get set up?
It's an iPhone, his iPhone front-facing camera, which on the 11 is wide angle, and on this tripod that he built, and we actually have a video. He built it to do time lapses, and there'll be a video on Tested next week or so about that tripod setup. It's super lightweight, little thing he cobbled together that he can place. And it's a fixed camera angle right now, but within the future with opportunities to move around.
Wild. Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, my kid has been tuning into some live streams, which have been awesome. Like, he's super into like Dude Perfect, and they did a series of live streams last week where they were doing live sports battles. But Mark Rober started, the YouTuber started a physics class this week. And so we went to the first one Monday, where he talked about helium and why it makes your voice, go higher. And he also used like sulfur hexafluoride to show your voice going lower. And he's going to do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so we've been checking out in that vein a lot of like online science and math YouTube streams, which have been great.
That sounds right.
Super interesting because it's people who do Twitch and do live streams all the time. They have that system down, and for a lot of YouTubers and people who are used to producing filmed and edited content, they're trying live streams as well, and they have big audiences, and it works. It's really fun to watch and put on. You've been doing daily chats, Kishore?
I've been doing a few days a week where I'll have like science communicators. We'll have like a happy hour chat. So we've been doing it on our friend Trace's channel. And so Bobek from JPL was on, Phil Plate was on. So we've had like a lot of different people from across the science communication spectrum. Really, we started it as almost like our own internal support mechanism for us just to talk with each other. But what it turned into is like we started kind of like delving into our thoughts and thinking about like information during this COVID time, but then we'll like just share science stories that have caught our eye. So that's been fun. There's a lot of like quirky science streams out there. My friend runs this kind of comedy intelligent nightlife club in New York called Caveat, and they do like 2 shows a night. And the other night I caught one where it was comedians playing bad video games, and they were playing Carmen Sandiego, and I weirdly watched that for like an hour.
Wow.
But there was one that was like Doctors Without Borders. So it was a series of doctors, and it was just sort of them, very off the cuff talking about what's going on in hospitals. And it was very touching. And one was in quarantine because of exposure, and just talking about what that process was like. And so I really felt like that was a much more intimate, interesting one. Alton Brown started a cooking one that was pretty good. That he's been doing. I haven't turned into any of the musician ones or like the DJ sets yet. I think that's like the next level thing.
Yeah. Acoustic sets from the home studio. Most of those successful musicians have really nice home studio setups, and not difficult to plug a mixer into a computer and get some really cool, just kind of tiny desk concerts from home.
Jeremy, What are you watching? Anything?
Well, I'm not watching a whole heck of a lot, but the people doing most of the streaming in my household are my kids, particularly my 9-year-old daughter, who is truly the extrovert of the family, who loves school, just loves it, and misses seeing her friends. And I'm so grateful for video chat, because that is how she is connecting with people. And if she's not doing schoolwork, she is on video chat, like with friends. Like it might be a Google Hangout, or it might be a one-on-one, or it might even just be a voice call, but she is able to continue to connect with people. And my God, like if the internet isn't considered a necessity, or wasn't considered a necessity until now, it is now, especially now. And personally, I watched Picard, and that's it. And I look forward to spoiling that with the 2 of you later in the show.
Yes, we'll have a Picard catch-up and spoiler discussion at the end of the show. Also relates to Picard, CBS All Access has a 1-month free subscription offer. I think the code is Picard Gift or Gift. You can Google it, but basically with the finale of Picard dropping today as you're listening to this podcast, and Kishore, you, I, and Ariel are going to do a conversation about that later for an off-world episode. You can actually watch all of the episodes if you subscribe using the 1-month free trial offer. You do have to put in a credit card, so it's not one of they're obviously trying to get people on board for CBS All Access. Two things I want to talk about, two West things. One is let's do Westworld first, because season 3 of Westworld is finally live. Do you remember when we were still excited about Westworld? Like
yes,
3 years ago?
For season 1.
For season 1. Season 2, I thought it was great. I know you dropped off, Jeremy.
Yep. Yeah,
I'm still excited.
Season 3 looks like a different show entirely.
It is I think it's best described as a reboot. It is not the video game analog, the things the systems that you like so much about the first season, that world building inside the park. It's in the real world now. Although episode 2, which aired last weekend, had some really cool sci-fi elements, almost bordering on a Rick and Morty episode. I want to say, and that's what I've loved so far. They're still big concepts, still amazing production value. They've added Aaron Paul in as a regular, and it's pure sci-fi now. It's sci-fi in a futuristic world. They filmed in, I wanted to say they filmed in Singapore. So the architecture looks like it's from the future because there's some amazing architecture there, and it's a high quality HBO show. I still recommend it. I can't wait to talk to someone about it when season 3 ends. And I'll give you the thumbs up or thumbs down recommendation. But go watch season 2 if you haven't yet. There's some good twists and turns there.
Mm-hmm. What's the other West thing?
West Wing. I don't know if either of you are West Wing followers.
I watched the whole series.
Yeah, me too.
You watched the whole series? Okay. I had not seen the whole series. It's Danica's favorite show. She's seen the entire series many times over. It's like built into her constitution.
Good show.
And amazing show. We've been watching it. She's been showing it to me because it's on Netflix. And honestly, it's an alternate reality that I kind of want right now, that I need right now. It's almost like it's a fantasy that is a great distraction from what's going on in the world.
As it was when it came out. Because
it came out during the George W. Bush eras. But even the partisan stuff aside, it's about smart people governing.
Yes.
Right. Doesn't matter if it's about whether it's about left wing or right wing. Even the Republicans on the show, whether it's Arnold Vinnick, played by Alan Alda, or they have a staffer who's a Republican, Ainsley Hayes. They're all competent and smart people who make compelling arguments for their side. Right? It's really they're debating with real arguments, and so obviously I don't have to recommend it for people because it's been fun to watch. But I do want to discuss a way I've been watching it. When we started binging it about a month ago, Danica started me off with season 2. We didn't watch season 1. We started off with season 2 because it was one of her favorite episodes. And she's like, watch this episode. If you like it, then we can start the West Wing. We watched that episode, and it was so good that it was a cliffhanger that we watched the next one and then the next one. And so we started at season 2, and I haven't seen a single episode of season 1.
Is season 2 the season that starts with the campaign?
No, that's season 3.
Okay.
Season 2 is the one that starts with the assassination attempt.
Okay.
And so it's the flashback to the first campaign, to Bartlett for America. How he decided to run, and how Josh came on board, and we've gone out. We're near the end of the series, season 7, and it's one of those things like watching Star Trek Next Generation. When you watched it, when you got to the end, you're wistful, right? You've come along this 7-year journey with these characters. You've seen them grown as actors. You've seen all their character arcs, and now when you're getting close and you're at the last 4 or 5 episodes, you want to savor it because the show acknowledges it, right? They're winding everything down. You're getting ready to say goodbye. They're getting ready to say goodbye, and you're getting sentimental, and they're bringing back cameos, and you're realizing after you watch this last finale, the series finale, there will be no more West Wing. There will be no more.
But you've beaten the system.
But I've beaten the system, and I have a whole season of season 1 to go back, and now I have this dilemma. Do I finish the series? I have 2 episodes left. Do I watch the penultimate and series finale, or do I hold that off and go back and watch season 1 now and frame it as a kind of a flashback?
Hey, Norm.
Yeah.
You've already watched the best parts of the show.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I watched the best part. It doesn't matter that season 1, and it's season 1 is Sorkin, but it doesn't matter that they haven't had their bearings yet. But what I want to see is, the actors still getting a handle on the roles. I want to see the context of where they came from, before they got to the end, the contrast of where they were when, before they realized before they won all their Emmys. And also I get to spend more time with them before saying goodbye.
I don't know. I feel like if you save those last 2 episodes, it's going to be anticlimactic for you once you get around to watching them. I say you finish them.
And then go back?
Yeah, whenever you want. Go back. Save that as long as you want to.
But I don't want to say goodbye. I don't want it to end.
Yeah.
It's not a show like Lost. I know there's I put this out on Twitter. And I know there are serialized shows where that wouldn't work. Like Game of Thrones, you couldn't do that because the last whole season was one episode built onto the next, built onto the next, built onto the next. I think for a show like this, or a show like Mad Men, or a show like Next Generation, it could absolutely work because there was no All Good Things, part 1 and part 2 is absolutely something that stands on its own. And last season, the 22 episodes preceding it were not a serialized story. DS9, different story. TNG, though, I think, going back to the first season, seeing Picard, right? And his relationship with children and his relationship with the crew and Riker, and seeing how they changed and then going back and seeing where they are, that would be a really interesting way to watch a show.
But TNG was consistently, the things that made it good were consistent from beginning to end. And
I disagree.
Well, I'm just talking about in terms of the cast and production, that there were no, there might have been some bad episodes, but West Wing fundamentally changed, after 4 seasons.
4 seasons.
For me, that made a huge difference. Much like Steve Carell leaving The Office. It made a huge difference in the quality of that show. By the way, did you guys read this week that it surfaced that he wanted to continue?
Really?
And NBC didn't want to, they never made him a deal. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
I finally learned what the shelter in place is doing to Norm. He's rethinking how to just watch television.
It's very existential.
I just can't wait for next week. Norm's gonna be like, I've figured out how to drink water differently.
Wouldn't be surprised. So those are the 2 West things I want to talk about: West Wing and Westworld. Yeah, and I asked Beauty and the Beast because the Rose is also in the West Wing of that mansion, the Enchanted Castle. Okay, that does it for pop culture news. Let's move on to technology news. That's where we're at, right? Technology. Okay, not a ton of stuff here in tech news this week, and we'll go by it relatively quickly. Something I did want to talk about is what's happening in the maker community and technology that's being employed there, especially in the 3D printing industry. And we've gotten actually a lot of people sending us links and pitches on social media about what companies are doing and ways to fabricate things that might help. And there's a lot of good intention there, but there's also places that have to be really careful. So what are some resources?
I did a deep dive on this issue. So I think if you're just looking for a primer on what's going on, Dale Doherty in the online Make magazine wrote sort of where do makers fit into the grand scheme? And he sort of organized it as, okay, plan A is the government responds and produces all of this stuff somehow. Maybe they can script manufacturers to make more masks and more gear and blah, blah, blah. Plan B is kind of where it feels like we are, which is where private industry steps up to like kind of produce stuff in the wake of the government doing it. Plan C is where it's the maker community. It's like where we're all rallying together to produce it ourselves, like very much like a callback to like early, almost like World War I times in the US, where everyone just kind of got put to work on stuff, but it wasn't necessarily like big factories running things. And so looking at it that way, it like is very useful. Like this is not something that is ideal by any stretch of the imagination. And I think if you look at it with that kind of skepticism, and I mean that in a positive way, I think it's a useful way to look at this. I think the best sort of like compendium of information that's out there on this is something that Nation of Makers put out, which is a list of, it's a big Google Doc. I can put the link in the show notes of all of these maker projects that are out there. And I think the number one thing that I've heard and felt by talking to a lot of people working in the space is like, people just want to contribute to what might be one of the grand societal problems of our lifetime. And from that perspective, it's great. It's just as long as your perspective on it is in alignment with like the realistic needs of the people you're serving, you can really do some stuff. I would say like the stuff that I've seen a lot of traction on is what Joseph Prusa did in the Czech Republic, where he printed face shields. And it was like he 3D printed the headband for it, and then laser cut a polycarbonate piece that would attach to it, and actually sent them over to some hospitals in the Czech Republic. And they're actually in use. Our colleague Jen Schachter, the old makerspace she worked at in Baltimore, OpenWorks, has been doing the same for Johns Hopkins. And there's a few other labs that have been doing this, where they're putting their 3D printers to work on something that can be like easily sterilized, but still is in high need from hospitals. What's sort of interesting about the project is that you can do something a little bit more on demand that's local. But what's hard is all the logistics of it, all like like how do you do QA on all of this? How do you actually like deliver the supplies where they need to be? Do you have like all the necessary gear to actually produce this? And from what I've seen, like makers have been able to produce like a few hundred of these a week. So it's not like some grand number compared to, you know, the kind of thousands and tens of thousands that hospitals actually have need for. But backfilling, like if you're looking at this from the perspective of anything is better than zero, it's the one project that like I think there's a lot more energy behind in the community. But I encourage people to check out that document. There's a lot of like organizing and discussion online around it. But I think, Norm, your perspective like totally resonates as like coming at this from a place of there's a lot of details behind the scenes that are not easy to solve. And a lot of those details are like logistics and whatnot. But I love the idea of contributing, because this problem isn't going to go away after the PPE shortage is dealt with. So there's going to be an aspect of this for makers. But I think the number one benefit is just seeing all these people like working together towards one problem and seeing how much knowledge and innovation they're bringing to bear on things in quick succession.
And there's a link you said to the Nation of Makers. That's your Google Doc. We'll put in the show notes.
Yeah, and there's also a sign-up form for people that have 3D printing capacity. And if you look at the spreadsheet, I think there's something like 5,000 people that have signed up with capacity, which is just like much higher number than I ever thought I would see in like 2 or 3 days. And like around half of those, maybe like 2,000 of those are in the US. So it's kind of, I find it heartening to see, and I think it's a great resource to go with.
Given the importance of these show notes compared to some other weeks, where can people find the show notes?
I'll put stuff in the YouTube comments
okay.
with direct links to stuff.
Okay. And we'll pin that comment, and we'll put it in the description as well, so they can see it there. Yeah, that's basically it for technology. There's some other stuff going on in the tech world. Apple dropped new iPad OS releases for the new iPad. So there's cursor support now on the iPad. There's a bunch of other just minor tech things, but really the tech world as a whole is kind of on halt as well.
There's been some unveil of new electric car designs, but I feel like that can definitely wait.
Yeah. Then let's move on, because we're going to run a little bit low on time, to our next segment, which is, I believe, a moment of science. Give us 1 second.
Now it's time for a moment of science.
All right. So this week, a rant, a reality check, some good news, and then some discussion of what's coming next. So my rant, it's a pretty short rant. There's so many freaking charts. Everyone is making charts, like their homemade charts of like plotting where we're going on this curve. This is especially true for a lot of US friends. So if you go on Twitter, you can probably see everyone making their own chart of like tests in this country, how many people are sick, how many people aren't. Hey, my kid in his Google Drive has made one too, because it helps him understand stuff. I will say these charts are incredibly complicated. Like even when you like control for population, control for, you can't talk about the US as one place right now, because what's happening in California versus New York is wildly different. I'm on chart overload. So when it comes to like the armchair epidemiology that's going on, and I've been guilty of this in the past, I'm kind of like just skipping over it at this point, because I think the critical information will still end up in your feed. But I think when we start to dive into like people's own charts and perspectives on this, where they're trying to do their own version of the math compared to where some experts come from, I feel like it's starting to crowd my mind with a bunch of noise that's not actually useful. So Rand, enough of the armchair epidemiology. Don't make your own charts if you don't have to. Reality check. Things are, I will say two things. Like it is not surprising, especially for our friends in the US, that things are not good right now, and that we're not on a good curve, and we won't even know when it's better until we're well past the point where the data says that things are getting better. It just won't feel that way. So the next few weeks are going to be bad. Like there's going to be people dying. We're going to probably see some like hospitals really hit their limits. And that's not out of hope. That's just realism. The best reality check talk that I've seen is Bill Gates did a Facebook Live with Chris Anderson from TED yesterday. And the reason it was the best is, yeah, I get it's Bill Gates, but Bill Gates has been working on pandemic response and understanding vaccines for longer than he was at Microsoft. Like you got to think about it this way. He is probably one of the leading voices on this. And he was just so matter of fact about stuff in this. He wasn't like animated or emotional. He's like, when people are talking about like containment, he's like, yeah, the US missed their window for that. It's gone. Like that's gone. Like we have to worry about mitigation at this point. Like if we were talking about containment in February and ramping testing in a certain way, sure, we could have been like Korea, but we're past that. And so it was a good reality check, but also he brought a lot of history to bear. He was like, this feels like a 57 or a 1918 epidemic. And like, there's a way that weaving of stories actually calmed me down. And it was a very even-keeled analysis, but it was also very much grounding, like here's where we are and here's what we need to do, without much sort of like hysteria attached. So if you're going to watch one thing, I think watch what Bill Gates said about this. Some good news or something else to check out. Our friend Kenji put together a guide around food and coronavirus, especially in the regime of like takeout and food prep. And he collaborated with a number of food scientists. And one of the key things that he found is like their analysis so far is that this outbreak shares very little, if zero, in common with foodborne outbreaks that we've seen in the past. And he outlines like the risk kind of levels associated with like, can I get delivery or takeout? Like, what's my risk of getting an infection, even if somebody like coughs on my food? And I thought it was a very useful guide, and I'll put that in the show notes. And I thought it was detailed and thoughtful in the way that somebody like Kenji would approach this.
Can you give us some highlights?
Yeah, and basically that it's because of what we've seen so far in the data, there's no indication that this really travels through food. Like, we're not seeing like there's kind of certain signatures of a foodborne outbreak or transmission of a virus, and like we know that from stuff like norovirus and other viruses that actually have some links to food, or like Legionnaire's disease, all these other things. And this isn't showing any of those hallmarks. So the likelihood, while there's still like a possibility that you could get sick from eating food that like somebody coughed on with some virus, it's pretty low. It's really seems to be like regular human contact with people is what's driving the infection at this point. And then the virus is activated under certain temperatures. I might get the number wrong, but I think it's something like 150 degrees. So like even if you order food and like heat it up in your microwave, you're probably going to kill any virus that's on there. There's a lot of analysis about like virus on like certain surfaces and stuff. So like, could I get it from like the delivery person that's handing me like a cardboard container? And like the evidence for that kind of transmission is pretty low at this point. So you can still take steps like wiping down containers that you receive from delivery and takeout. But it's not that there is no risk. There's still a lot of uncertainty because we're so early, but generally speaking, the delivery and takeout is a reasonably safe mechanism for getting food right now, was Kenji's analysis. All right, what happens next? I want to get past this. So let's start talking about what the world looks like if we get through this. So let's say 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month from now, in the U.S. We don't know how long. Yeah, that somebody said that.
Yeah.
Let's say we start to see like a dramatic decline in number of cases, like our hospital systems start to catch up. What kind of happens next? So we don't have to just guess. And there's going to be a lot of like opinion pieces guessing. So I spent a lot of my weekend, by the way, I don't recommend this for people, reading historical information on what it was like to go through previous epidemics. And there was this great book called The Great Influenza, which is the story of the 1918 epidemic. There's all this WHO literature on social science related to past epidemics. Like, there's going to be this kind of like rebound effect where people are upset and angry and feeling loss and feeling grief, and that's going to happen. Like, we have to anticipate that and engage people around it. So this feeling of people being like, let's reopen the economy like right away, we've seen that before. So that's like something that we totally should expect. We should expect that there's going to be some re-emergence of the disease. Like, scientists are telling us that you don't just stop it here and then it's gone forever. Like, we hope it's that way, but the more likely scenario is that we're going to see spikes where this is re-emerging. We can see that in real time. Like in Singapore, which basically has controlled all their cases, just had a spike from a daycare center where they saw like 27 new cases emerge from that. And so what's going to have to happen from that is probably a new level of like surveillance, a new level of infrastructure, like building fever clinics that are like designed to test and isolate people. I think we have to start getting used to the idea that masks in public are going to be a thing that society is going to have to adapt to, like people wearing masks around, which is much more common in a lot of Asian cultures right now. But the reason they're common there is because of going through previous iterations of possible pandemics. And the crazy thing is, we've gone through it too here in San Francisco. So there's this incredible story that I found. There's this book called American Pandemic, and it talked about in the wake of 1918 that San Francisco passed an ordinance that you had to wear a mask out to prevent the transmission of flu, and people rebelled, and they formed an anti-mask league. Like there was the ordinance carried, like police could fine you and even potentially jail you for not wearing a mask in public. And so, but this like rally against like, no, that's not the American way. And so I think you're going to see this like push and pull, especially over this summer, of experts weighing in on like what we need to do to surveil and to understand and prevent pandemics from breaking out. And the things you're going to hear are stuff like better hygiene, more masks in public. There's going to be stuff about access to GPS data for people that have had the disease, so we can trace who they've come in contact with. Really gnarly, thorny stuff. And you can expect people are going to push back on that, and push back on it hard. Because it's a prediction. It's like we've seen it in the past, and there's no reason to expect it won't happen again. And then you should start preparing yourself mentally that this is going to reemerge, and that reemergence is going to cause a disruption. Maybe not the same kind of disruption we're seeing now, but it will be there. But I really recommend reading these historical things versus the current news, because it isn't just telling you that this will happen again. It also tells you what worked in those places. And some of the best examples are coming out of Singapore. Singapore has really done a lot to control their disease, but also put in a lot of social measures to deal with like the mental health effects that emerged, to deal with like surveillance, so that, you know, when you go to the grocery store, you get your temperature taken, which seems like crazy, but that's the kind of thing it's going to necessary to make us feel safe going in public again. Because what I started to think about is like, what is it going to take for me to go to a sports stadium? What's it going to take for me to go to a concert? What's it going to take for me to send my kid back to school and just feel safe about all of those things, knowing that this virus is still out there? And you can have like a perspective of existential dread, or you can look at history and seeing how we've done it in the past and know that the solutions are there. We just have to have the will to do those things. So that may not sound positive, but I think that's the really positive thing. And so I'll just say, just start like thinking about that feels better than thinking about where we are today, because it's starting to prepare myself that some things in society are going to change, and getting me socialized to how that's going to change now before it happens. Because otherwise it's going to feel like rushed.
Yeah, I found myself over the past week seeing people with masks, and I have a feeling of gratitude that I didn't have before, that they're wearing one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
one other thing I want to say, just for the record, a treatment is really far away. You might be hearing otherwise. A treatment's really, really far away, and we're not even sure at this point that we can do it. So we should also like level set what our expectations are around that. It's going to take 18 months at best. And I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to develop a vaccine based on some of the information coming out. We don't know if this is a seasonal thing. We don't know if it's going to, how it's going to mutate and strain. We don't know about the development process. There's all sorts of good news on that front, but don't let that good news infect you with a level of hype around when that's going to come. Sorry, Norm, you're about to say something.
I'll just say, like, I completely agree. Like the unexpected way in which things will change, even as the immediate crisis eventually, gets figured out, are things that we shouldn't necessarily fear, but should prepare ourselves for, right? Whatever normal means a year from now, or even 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. And as people keeping eyes on companies and technology and, the way capitalism works in America, we should anticipate a lot of companies shifting their priorities and new companies starting up to accommodate those changes. And that's something to again, not be afraid of, but to prepare ourselves. And it's interesting to think about. We are using technology right now, literally, to communicate in a way that we wouldn't have done 3 weeks ago. And the way we're podcasting now may change in a year from now, as different technologies become more available.
Yeah, and those changes, there's not going to be a lot of easy things that come to solve this. Like there's no magic situation, nothing coming. There's going to be a lot of hard choices, and a lot of those hard choices are on us. They're going to be about socialization, dealing with the after effects of being essentially locked down for a month to or longer, depending. Dealing with like the grief of the people that died, and just dealing with the sense of like, can I take my family out to dinner and feel like okay about it? Like those are things that we're going to have to overcome, and we can only overcome them together. And the way we dealt with that after 9/11 in the US, probably not going to work this time around. This is a very different situation. But all in all, like, I feel like I didn't sound positive, but I feel pretty positive about that. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for being a continuing, reassuring voice, even in uncertainty. It's good to have you as a resource. That does it for Moment of Science. We are running a little bit short on time. I'll let you know before I move on to the next segment that this episode of This Is Only a Test is also made possible with support from TurboTax. TurboTax is here to help this tax season by making tax filing easier for you. They've made it their mission to give you all the tools and advice you need to get your taxes done with confidence, like making uploading your W-2 as easy as taking a picture. Just use your phone or tablet and simply snap a picture of your W-2, then watch your information appear right in place in your tax return. You can be sure you're filing your taxes correctly while at the same time making sure you're getting the best possible refund. TurboTax, all people are tax people. And here we go. Our final segment will be the
VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
All right, VR Minute. We're going to go through this relatively quickly. There's just a few bits of news I want to call out. One, Oculus has updated a new UI update to the Oculus Quest, which does some bug fixes, as well as also long-awaited integration of an experimental feature to allow pass-through. And we were all curious about what the pass-through toggle option would be on the Quest. It's not 2 taps of a button. It's 2 taps to the side of the headset.
I assume they mean the power button.
No, I haven't got this updated in my Quest. I don't think it's the power button. I think it's using the gyro and detecting a double tap on the headset to allow pass-through.
Really?
The power button's a power button.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, if they got that to work without false positives, bring it on.
Machine learning.
Okay.
That's all they need, right? That's why it's an experimental feature. And
everything's a button.
Everything's a button, right? You can tap the top, you can tap the side, right? Just don't shake your head real fast twice.
Right.
But you can use that to toggle the outside world.
Okay.
It's kind of neat if that's how it works. At the same day that Half-Life Alyx was released, HP also dropped a teaser for a new headset they're working on. They, of course, have the HP Reverb, a Windows Mixed Reality headset, which has still to this date one of the highest resolution screens, this side of Pimax. And
well, it's a smaller FOV than Pimax, so it's a tighter DPI.
Yes, highest DPI of a consumer headset across the entire field of view, not including the Vario headset. But they're building a next generation headset with Steam VR, and interestingly, they call it a no compromises headset in collaboration with both Microsoft and Valve. There's a teaser video that, on its face, like you see a glimpse of this headset in low light. It looks like still a Windows Mixed Reality headset. I wonder if it's going to use Inside Out from Windows Mixed Reality with 2 cameras, in addition to with the option of Steam VR Lighthouse tracking
for the controllers,
for controllers, or for the headset itself. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if it was either or. Only the Cosmos right now has an either or option, and that's a $200 upgrade for the faceplate for Steam VR tracking. And I would love for this to be a solution to use the Index controllers or even the Vive ones, because the Windows mixed reality controllers are still the worst ones by far.
It looks like index style headphones, sort of
Yes,
off the
that
ear.
could also. Yeah, that could also. I mean, the Reverb had those headphones, had kind of index style headphones. I wonder if they're actually using the Valve developed headphone technology.
Yeah,
not sure. Yeah, but it's just a teaser image. You can sign up with HP to get more info, and we've already reached out to try to get more info. They'll let us know when they're ready to share more.
that's cool.
Jeremy, you were doing a VR experiment as well?
Oh yeah, so my son and I both have Quests. We're very lucky to each have one. So we have 2 Quests, and we're quarantined. So we found on SideQuest an app that you can download for free to an Oculus Quest called Triton VR, and it is a shared location kind of experience, that you might get from a location-based experience, where you're both in the same space. And it doesn't do that through any kind of special magic where they're sharing actual geometry of the room with the Quest or even Guardian data. It's relatively clever. Basically, you both have to have a large enough Guardian, when I think the minimum is actually 3 meters by 3 meters, so quite large. And then you place something in the center of the room, a piece of paper, a pencil, and you each take turns standing on it and hit calibrate. And then after you both do that, you both are in the same, like it kind of synchronizes. What it assumes is you're being honest about where you're pressing calibrate.
But it's not just location, it's orientation too.
Yes, because you have to face the same direction.
Right.
And then you can, when you both do that, you can then see the other person in VR, and they are where they are in the real world.
Wow.
And then you each go to your own base. You have a red base and a blue base, and then you can equip your weapon and walk through this series of corridors, very, very narrow corridors, basically like human width. And, basically it's a one-on-one shooting game, and you find the other person and you try to take them out before they take you out. But it's cool because you are in the same space. Like, you are literally walking around the same room and not colliding with each other, not colliding with the world because your Guardian is all set up, and you're not colliding with the other player because the game tells you where they are. And so it's super cool. I mean, it really is something that we haven't seen from home VR yet. Like, home VR has always been single person shares, one location. You can do multiplayer games, but that's over the internet. Shared location is something Oculus has teased. They're developing technology to enable that. This is a home developer finding a workaround solution to give you a taste of what that feels like. And the app is, it's free, and it has all the production qualities of a free app. Like, it is not a great menu system. You have to enter the IP address of the other Quest. It does not tell you the IP address of the other Quest. You have to sort of figure that out. But it's worth trying if you have a couple Quests and you're stuck at home.
It's called Triton VR. It's an alpha right now, available via SideQuest to sideload. The developers do say that they will support up to 4 players at once, but you did it via 1v1.
Yeah. Yeah, we only did the small room. There is a 3x3 meter. I think there's a 4x6 and a 6x6. We just don't have the room. We tried doing one of the larger ones, and our home bases were actually like in the wall, so we couldn't even see what the rooms looked like.
Wow. Is multiplayer possible if you want to do this remotely and not have a shared space and just play the game?
I don't see why not, as long as you opened up your IP address, from your router.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it wouldn't be, although I don't think there's any kind of voice, so you wouldn't be able to hear each other.
And the experience you have of being able to hear footsteps, hear someone laughing, pressing, that the awareness that you could literally run into someone, that made it fun.
Yeah, and you start to use your hearing too to deduce where they might be.
Right.
Because not just in game but in the real world. So you start to do like Marco Polo, and just just pretend like you're asking them a generic question, but you're trying to locate them. Yeah, it's fun.
So it's a game where actually being isolated in a headphone would be disadvantageous.
Yes, and that's where the Quest comes in handy.
Yeah. Cool. And as we mentioned earlier, we're going to queue up now a about half-hour interview I did with Robin Walker and Corey Peters from the Valve team. Again, it does not dive into story spoilers for Half-Life Alyx, but it is insight, a little bit peek into their decision-making process, into the world building and also the game design of making this game for VR. So please enjoy. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to sit down with remotely with Robin Walker and Corey Peters from the Valve team. You guys, we're recording this a week in the past as everyone here is listening to it, but hopefully by now, fingers crossed, the launch went smoothly. Congratulations, I guess.
Yes.
From where you guys are right now, what's it like? It looks like you guys are working from home, but what's the last 2 weeks been like for you guys getting this ready to go?
I think surreal is probably the right word. I mean, there's an element of surrealness I find at the end of any long project, right? You work on something for 4 years and it just gains momentum sort of in your mental space. And that last 2 or 3 months, it's just sort of overwhelmingly in your head all the time. It's like you just can't stop sort of thinking about it. And, we've been fortunate on this project that it hasn't been we've put in some extra hours at the end, but it hasn't been grueling. We've all managed to maintain, the sort of our family lives and everything. But that mental, the sort of process of shipping still gets into that mental side of you where you still find yourself musing and thinking about stuff you got to get done and so on. And all. So I find this increasing amount of surrealness as you hit the end of projects. And then to have this whole other sort of thing happening in the world at large, sort of muscle way into your head at the same time, just added this whole other layer of it's so, everything feels up in the air. And so hopefully shift.
We definitely have heard from our audience that, even though things are looking kind of crazy in the world right now, VR is a great opportunity to escape. And, a lot of people are working from home and they're taking that Monday off and they're going to play Alyx.
Yeah. They have a good time. Escape from the madness, but
yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to use this opportunity to we're not going to go into spoilers or anything, but to kind of pick your brains about what the last 4 years journey has been like, especially not only making a new Half-Life game, but also making it for VR specifically. And you guys are such great world builders. One of the things I think people already in seeing the Steam Home environments that you guys have put out is like entering City 17 and being in VR. It's something completely different. Can you talk about the world building process for Alyx, designing levels, choosing locations, and how that worked with designing it with VR in mind?
Go ahead.
Sure. A little bit in the abstract, and then maybe Corey can follow up and talk a little bit more in the specifics of level design. This project was sort of an interesting one where, because of the way it started, we had sort of early prototypes that we were putting people into in those very early days, just to sort of get a sense of what is it like to play a Half-Life game in VR? What are the things people want to do? What are the things that are more, what becomes more fun? What's that translation process look like? And that early prototype, this is going all the way back to, I think, about February 4 years ago. One of the things, that prototype was using essentially all Half-Life 2 assets, like just unchanged textures, blurry 2003 low-res textures, I think with some high-res Counter-Strike Go gloves that we stole to just have hands. And one of the most common things we would hear from people were various versions of saying, wow, it's kind of amazing being in a space that is really familiar to me, but while at the same time it feeling very fresh and different, like I'm there in a way that I was never really there in the past. And so that experience of getting that reaction from so many people really caused us to spend a bunch of time thinking about the amount of sort of nostalgia we wanted to employ in the game and the amount of novelty we wanted to employ in the game, because we were it was very clear that we should target that sort of nostalgic feeling, at least deliberately, in a number of ways, both audio, visual, gameplay wise, and so on. But at the same time, we don't want to rely too heavily on that, right? Like, there are going to be people who play the game who haven't played that before. There are going to be people whose memories, their 13-year-old memories of what that looks like, are going to be a little unrealistic, and so on. And so that led to us making a set of choices throughout the game. But things like the reason we started in City 17, the reason we started in a familiar looking place, that it evokes City 17, but at the same time, we know we're not in the same time period as Half-Life 2. So we're a little, you're on this halfway point, not quite halfway point, but you're on this transition between the world of Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2. So the Combine haven't yet sort of completed their rule over things. Breen is still fumbling in his efforts to sort of hand humanity to the Combine. And so, there are a lot of opportunities there at both the macro scale and at the micro scale where we would spend time deliberately thinking about, let's use a sound effect here that is deliberately evocative of that sound effect in Half-Life. Now let's, how long have we been doing this? What's the, where's the first point where we start to really show you something new where you say, what the heck is that? Those sorts of things were very deliberate choices throughout the development of this. You want to talk about level design stuff at all, Corey? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey from when we started to where we are now, and all the different lessons we've kind of learned in the process. I mean, when we had started and with just those Half-Life assets, and we sort of built out some what we thought were sort of the correct levels and types of experiences, we were quickly learning what type of experiences were more desirable and more interesting in VR. Some of that just came from putting on that headset and moving through those spaces and observing playtesters move through those spaces. Playtesters kept wanting to explore every nook and cranny, and it allowed us as game designers to really add a bunch of interesting little things for players to find. So in Half-Life 2 experience, the speed at which you're moving is pretty quick through the environment. And so people are slowing down. They're looking under every table. They're looking under every box. They're sticking their head in a vent. It allows us to just put more interesting things for the player in those environments. And it really allowed us to build up the world in a way, and I think in a depth that you haven't yet experienced in a Half-Life game. And so that's been really exciting and fun to do as a team.
And the fidelity of that world and the objects that kind of inhabit it, not only are they high resolution and they look visually great, but they're very interactive, and physics has always been a big part of the Half-Life series. Can you talk about, the push and pull of wanting to have everything be openable, have tons of physics objects, versus the demand of making a game, a single player narrative game, and how you design levels? I notice, there's a lot of stuff to look at in the beginning when players first jump in, and then how things are dispersed, I guess.
It's all about, I guess one way to think about it is like thinking of it as a sort of budget that you have to spend. In the past, we've had the player moving at such a great rate of speed that we couldn't afford to effectively spend that much time placing in every object under and over and in these little places for you to find, because we just weren't observing players really doing that in the environments. Whereas here now they were going through and exploring every nook and cranny.
Yeah, one of the things about game design is you're always going to succeed more if you align your efforts with the wishes of players, right? As a game designer, if you try and really want players to do something, but they're not super interested in doing it, you're going to have to do a lot of work and a lot of fighting to get them to come along with that ride. So, a lot of what Corey's talking about are things that came out of us aligning with players' desires and intentions. I think one of the reasons we see that so much is that one of the big changes in moving to VR, certainly for Half-Life, but I think sort of generally true of sort of first-person games in general moving to VR, is I think for an enormous number of us gamers, we have internalized already and don't particularly think about the fact that we're very used to, in first-person shooters, essentially be we understand that we're fundamentally being simulated as a box, right? That we are a box sliding around this world. And that manifests in all these subtle ways that we don't tend to think about, but we're just used to. Like there's a distance to which you can get up to something and you can't get any closer than that. You know, maybe the game gives you sort of a binoculars like zoom functionality, but you can't get closer, right? You're zooming your eyes in. Similarly, like if you go up to a usable object like a health station, we're used to the idea that we might press a key like E and the health station may animate to sort of tell us, hey, you are interacting with this, but it's still across this divide. You know, in the last few years, maybe we've seen like hand view model stuff start to get good enough to be able to go out, reach out and interact, but that's still not really you. It's still sort of the box you're in. And I think the thing that happens when players internalize that we saw over the years is that everything else becomes sort of box-like as well, right? You see an object or a table or a chair, and you sort of understand there's an invisible box around that as well. One of the things that Half-Life 2 did well was to, I think, break down that concept of chairs, as a box into something that was a little more versatile than that. You might pick it up or rotate it or something like that. But the step to VR and having track controllers really sort of crushes that whole, like breaks that whole box thing down, right? Now you've got hands, you can reach out and grab things. You can pick up your thing and you can bring it close and you can turn it over and look at it and put it down. And you can put it down gently or you can throw it away against the wall. You can see something like a health charger and you reach out and you put your hand on it. And while it's doing that, you can look around and under it and all these sorts of things. And so that whole sort of like, layer between you as a player and the world you're interacting with that I think we're also used to having that we don't even really notice or question it anymore. That's just gone now. And as a result,
right,
what we're seeing is players everywhere take advantage of that. They're like, they put their hands on the desk and then they look under the desk. They pick the desk up, they flip it over and then they work on the next thing. And so there's this enormous freedom that comes from that realization that like, hey, finally there's this like abstraction between me and the world that's just gone. And I can have a lot of fun with that. I can explore that. And as a result, we saw players, trying to do that with every object they could come across.
Yeah, it's a lot of opportunity for emergent behavior because you don't know what the players are going to do. They have so much more freedom to move around, and you want to design systems to help accommodate that. And so using Source 2 here, was Source 2 built? I mean, it's been an evolving thing, but what about the engine helps accommodate, I guess, all the things you just talked about? And does it also accommodate developers and level designers designing in VR, or are you still going kind of back and forth between the flat screen and in headset?
Yeah, and there's all this stuff to talk about there. We do. I mean, the really easy one at the end, we jump between VR and non-VR as we do development all the time. And Source 2 had a couple of big focuses, but one of its main focuses was sort of an internal one. It was about how do we, we saw, as I think all developers did, that there was a significant increase in the quality requirements for the worlds we were in these days and the ways we wanted players to be able to interact with them. And so we felt like the tools we needed to build to be able to build those kinds of worlds had to improve significantly. So when you look at Source 1 and Source 2, for example, in our eyes, one of the biggest changes that's interesting to us is actually just at the tool level, right? There's been an enormous amount of movement forward at the rendering and all that sort of level throughout the industry, but tools were a thing we were very interested in. And so we spent a lot of time on that stuff. Certainly, like, for example, the tools we use to build our levels, like our worlds today, significantly more improved than Source 1. And in some ways, some of the most important bits with respect to how that improved Alyx are really things sort of perhaps, I bet, obvious to anyone if you've used Photoshop or anything, but like being able to simultaneously have a number of different disciplines work on the same area of the world. That feels like a minor thing. It took a bunch of technology to do that, but it had an enormous impact on the product itself. There is far more sound and art and interaction in the world than we've ever shipped before, just because there were, instead of this sort of like level designer being this real bottleneck to getting stuff into the game because it was really hard to have multiple people working in that same area at the same time, there was just this enormous influx of content coming in from everyone because they could get in there. So little things like that, or things like that, which may sound sort of abstracted, but they have very significant impacts on the actual product we build.
In terms of physics objects.
Yeah, I was about to jump to physics. And then the next thing that we spent a bunch of time on was building our own physics engine. So we took sort of a lot of the lessons we learned from in Source 1, where we were using Ipion, which was a physics engine that we licensed. It eventually went on to become Havoc. But one of the things that we always really cared about in our physics engines that I think actually sort of the physics engines as a whole after Half-Life 2 moved away from was this idea of this trade-off that you were forced to make in your physics engines about fidelity versus sort of scale. Like at the end of the day, you have a finite amount of CPU resources to use. You've got to decide, what do you care about? In Half-Life 2, we cared a lot about really good simulation of a small number of objects, right? When we looked at it, the kinds of things we wanted to do from a gameplay sense, like actually building interactive gameplay objects, you needed a fidelity of simulation of them that was great enough that a player could go up and pick up the cup and move it around and push it into the table and use its mass to solve a puzzle, all these sorts of things. And that because you have a finite amount of resources, there's just straight up trade-offs there. That means you can't have 100,000 of those cups. But we felt like that was the right trade-off for players for gameplay purposes. Physics engines, I think, sort of moved perhaps further away from that over the years intervening. I think there was a lot of focus on, large-scale visual effects, making it so when an explosion goes off, lots of stuff flies around and looks really cool. Those things have real value. I don't want to diminish those. I'm just saying that those were not the trade-offs we were so interested in. So with Source 2, we decided we wanted to build our own physics engine to sort of keep moving forward in making the trade-offs in physics that we were interested in. With the increase in performance and the lessons we've learned, we can simulate a lot more objects, even at the fidelity we like, than we used to be able to. But it's still that's one of the cases where we've invested very heavily in Source 2 because we want to be able to build the kinds of experiences you get with Alyx, where you can really manipulate those physics objects in ways that, as best as we can do, won't suddenly fly off into the world or explode or anything like that. Really let you, I guess, make the world work the way you expect it to work when you try and pick up a cup or open a filing drawer, filing cabinet or a drawer or something.
So you're saying not the same kind of like speed run stuff we saw with Half-Life 2.
Right. They're going to do all that anyway. We were, who knows? It's terrifying to think about.
Yeah. What about in terms of combat and weapons? Can you speak to a little bit of the enemy design and the weapon design, and how, like you said, going back to things that would be familiar, but what kind of opportunities you wanted to take advantage of with VR, and also with having time to think about making this game to make it new and different?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in a bit here, and then maybe Corey can follow up with something so I don't monopolize too much of this. The big exciting thing from an AI perspective that we noticed fairly early on, we really noticed it at the point where we started getting into ranged combat. We focused early on melee enemies like zombies and so on because they're just too good a training tool. But as soon as we started getting into really starting to work on enemies that had ranged weapons, we noticed something that was just really exciting. And that was that the average sort of the time that sort of combat takes a lot longer to play out with ranged enemies in VR than it does in non-VR. But not because players are, it's going slowly or players aren't as effective. They're actually all, in our experience, players are all better shots in VR than they are with a mouse and keyboard, which was surprising to us. But players take longer to do everything, but they're more involved, more stressed, more engaged in the fight than they ever have been before. And so, we would start to see Combine soldiers who would last a minute or two in a given fight. And as a AI, designer or programmer, that's a really exciting thing. You have a lot more opportunity for performance if your enemy stays alive longer. Right? As a general rule, we used to joke that in Half-Life 2, if you're a Combine soldier, you're going to live about 10 to 20 seconds after the player engages you, and your goal is to try and look as entertaining as you die as you possibly can, because you're not really going to necessarily get much opportunity to do more than that. And with VR, we really saw that that wasn't the case. That things took longer. Even where are my enemies and where are they moving and what are they up to? Like that was the thing that took time and effort on the part of the player. And the cool thing was this sort of stuff all became part of the skill. Like you watch players early on and they're like focusing on reloads. Reloads are a thing that really engross them wholly, and they get good at it, and they start, eventually start putting flair on it and so on. But at the point where they start getting good at it, then they're able to start doing other things. Like they'll be tracking their, the combat be sort of really dynamic and at the same time like fresh, I guess, thing. Like that, the sort of player skills move from a set of things that people are very experienced with over the last years into a whole new realm of new things that they hadn't been doing before.
And then Corey.
Oh no, I was just going to add a little bit. I think my connection cut out there for a little bit, so hopefully this doesn't overlap too much. But I mean, from a weapons design perspective, the one thing that was really exciting was that now, because you have two separate hands, you can do more things at the same time. So reloading becomes an actual physical mechanical skill that you can build up over time. And I think Robin touched on that a little bit, where as you get better at that, you start these little flourishes and flips and able to switch weapons, reload weapons while not staring at the gun the whole time. But we would have situations where the player would get run down by a zombie, struggle with the clip, trying to get it in there. They would drop the clip, they'd put the clip in there, and they would kill the zombie, or they would get killed by the zombie. And we would react to that and sort of like, oh no, like they're having a terrible time. They're fumbling with this thing that the zombie kills them. And they would take off the headset and look back at us and be like, wow, that was amazing. I need to get better at this reloading thing. And it was just really fun experience to build on.
In the same vein, in a very Half-Life way, you guys aren't afraid of putting puzzles in the world where you're asking players to really think about it. And, as I play through Half-Life 1, 2, and now Alyx, there are definitely the similar moments where I'm standing, I think that it's a bug, or I for some reason can't figure something out, and then 5 minutes later there's a great aha moment. And level design goes to a big part of that. Can you talk about designing levels and the puzzles for that, the Half-Life flair?
Sure. I mean, in some ways, some things don't change, but you have new ways to provide input into the world now that you never could before. So sometimes it could be as simple as remembering that you have two hands to manipulate an object around a space or solve a problem with. And other times it's still more of a like, oh, this is a Half-Life type puzzle where you're moving physics objects around trying to solve the particular challenge ahead of you. It was always really interesting watching players come up with creative solutions to some of the problems. And sometimes we rolled that back into the puzzle. It's like, wow, they came up with a great solution. I like it way better than what I was thinking they're going to have to do to solve this problem. We would just roll with that and see how things went. So we just kind of kept play testing and learning from what players were trying to do and what their desires were. So in some ways, we let sort of real world type solutions influence a lot of the puzzle designs.
I think I'm going to take a shot at answering this, and hopefully I won't cut out again. But I think one of the ways we managed to make a game that is sort of full of novelty yet still feels familiar to you as a Half-Life product is that in a lot of cases, we're asking players to do things sort of at a course level that has changed completely. You do all those things using multiple hands, head, all sorts of, you reload completely differently. If you want to solve a physics puzzle, you solve it differently. If you, try to move around, if you're trying to just figure out that what's a common problem in Half-Life of like, I'm here and I want to be up there. How do I do that? All those kinds of things are things that are familiar, I think, to anyone who's played a Half-Life game, but the way that you actually execute on those things in Half-Life Alyx is all completely new.
And then what comes after launch? I know when you guys announced the game, you said there would be some set of SDK or tools available for people to start tinkering with the world. What are the plans for that?
Yeah, we will definitely be releasing the level editing tools that we have used to build the game. There's a bunch of work in that. I'd like to figure out how we can release as much of the stuff we use to build it as possible there. beyond that, there's a bunch of work to do to bring out a full Source 2 SDK. I don't think we've yet figured out when or if that's going to happen. There's a whole bunch of people who right now are focusing on finishing Alyx, and we have to convince them to, once they've done that, now go and do a whole other thing that ships hopefully, not too far away as well. So that's a sort of a thing we need to circle back around to and figure out afterwards, which, is actually how we've always handled it. Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2's SDKs came out afterwards too. It's just, there's always a lot more work in those than people realize. And sorry, this window just popped up on screen. There's always a lot of, when you're finishing a game, it's just so much to get done that you start like ejecting anything that just doesn't have to be there on the day you release. And SDK is always a thing where it's like, well, it can always come a little later. Like there's a whole game for them to play and have fun with. Let's get that out and then figure out what we do next after that.
Alrighty. I think that's basically the time we have with you guys, and I apologize for some of the connection problems. But
on my end, sorry.
But looking forward to whatever you guys do next, and I can't wait for other people to start giving you guys feedback, and thanks for being so open about the development process.
No problem, Norm. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoy the game.
Yeah, thanks. It's great chatting with you guys. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Corey.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that. Apologies for any of the connection problems that we had. Some of the answers might have been cut off toward the end. But now we move on to our final segment. Spoiler alert. Let's talk about Picard.
Let's do a quick recap of this episode. I'll do like a 30-second recap. So we left off with our delightful crew heading towards the synth planet. In this episode, they emerge with Narek hot on their tails. They descend to the planet with these like weird flower things kind of helping them descend down onto the planet. Just before they do, a Borg cube piloted by 7 of 9 and with some remaining X-Borg types and the Elnor are on that, and it also arrives. They all go down to the planet and they meet a synth colony that is a mass set of more advanced data-like synth creatures that are living harmoniously. They welcome Picard as somebody who, helps shepherd data through life. And then we meet Brent Spiner as Noonien Sung's son, who is working there as a research scientist. That was quite the reveal. And as we progress through the episodes, the synths learn about the admonition, which is that the vision that Jurati had been given by the Starfleet security chief. Yeah, and they see it as not as a warning, but as an understanding that there's a race of synthetic life forms out there that are watching and that they begin called for help. And then there is a Soji-like data synth there who leads kind of like a rebellion that they're going to call that group and try to exterminate organic life, or at least fight back against organic life. And Picard is sidelined as it seems like we're heading for a battle between a Romulan armada of 200 plus ships approaching the synth planet and the synth calling for backup from a group that may not value organic life.
So
well done, Kishore.
Yeah, that was well done. So many of these like reveals. It was the penultimate episode. Next week, or this week, as you're listening to this, is the finale. So this is considered a two-parter. It's named as such, and it lays it all out as to what the season-long mystery has been, and it's about the first contact equivalent for androids, I guess is the best way to describe it. This admonition, right? Admonishment, admission. I can't pronounce it. The prophecy drove the Romulans insane because it was not meant for organic life forms. It was meant as an invitation for synthetic life forms, much like in the movie Contact. That's what it reminded me of, right? The message in Contact that Jodie Foster receives as an invitation to enter this new world, this new shared, universe of alien life. Here, it's a shared universe we haven't seen yet of synthetic life. I said this before, it's not kind of what I expected from Picard, and I don't know if that's bumping into my enjoyment of this reveal. I think that it's a little bit the twins, the doubling of twins, having Soji and Daj be a twins that look human, but then also having a mirrored set of twins with Jana and Sutra, who look more Data-like. That was a little bit confusing, and I think not played very well. Although I think this is hinting at the fact that it's not Soji that's the destroyer; it's Sutra that's the destroyer, and they just look the same. Maybe that's the way they're shoehorning this. I don't know how. I was hoping the Borg would be more integrated, and if the idea that the Romulans saw this, it was a dark secret for the Romulans for generations. We never got that sense what that dark secret was and why it drove their version of an even more extreme Tal Shiar that was trying to kill synthetics for forever during the Empire.
I just am lost constantly throughout this episode. I don't understand. Are we supposed to look at this invitation, this belief that there's this android race out there who's always listening? Are we supposed to think of that as a religion that androids have? Because that would be kind of be interesting. But we don't know if it's real or not yet.
Right.
Are we supposed to see Picard is what makes this different than Next Generation, the fact that Picard is truly fallible? Because he really is out of touch with reality if he thinks that the Federation will listen to him, which he promises that they will do. And he's wrong, and Brent Spiner's character calls him out for that. And I'm just wondering, clearly Brent Spiner's character is not totally righteous and good. There's something evil about him, and there's something very evil about the new Soji. And is she a triplet?
No. And I'll say it's not a triplet because the way it's. I had to actually go through forums to understand this. The reason that Captain Rios recognized Soji, the dark secret he harbored, was that from this synth enclave that Bruce Maddox worked on and Noonien Seng's son worked on, they sent out these emissaries, Flower and Jana, who look like androids. And Rios, in his past life, was on the ship that received these emissaries, almost in a Matrix way, going back to the androids that came out from the Matrix. And the Federation and the Romulans were so scared of these synthetic, that they infiltrated Federation and ordered Starfleet to have the captain kill these two emissaries. The captain did. Rios freaked out. The captain killed himself, and that's been his burden, and that's the dark secret he had. And so this enclave tried to reach out to the Federation. Their emissaries, their brother and sister, were killed. And then Bruce Maddox, I guess, made a better version of them that didn't look like Data and sent these twins out into the world, which we still don't get what their mission really was, why they had these false memories, and why they were planted on the artifact, and also what Daj was doing, with her false memories with her boyfriend on Earth. We don't get their motivations, and back to episode 1, right?
But why do they look like each other?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I know, that feels like a cost-cutting move. I don't.
It felt yeah.
9 episodes in, it's weird to give this critique. This felt rushed. If the thesis of this show was what would it be like for to have first contact with synthetic life, that's an interesting thesis for the show. I can understand why Patrick Stewart was like, that's interesting. That's like a different arc here. And maybe it starts with a disillusioned Picard. But to start that process in show 9, it just feels sort of like rammed in. Like, oh, there's this whole set of other things, other synthetic life out there. To have that revealed this late.
Not even revealed, just told to us.
Yeah, it's like a MacGuffin, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's red matter. And you're right. Like, if the conceit of the show, if the overarching theme is an existential crisis on organics, that they, with their squabbles and with their politics and their self-aggrandizing, exploration, their mandate to explore the galaxy, which the Federation has been doing for all of Star Trek, right? That's been the thesis of Star Trek. If that is pointless and futile, because what the real next frontier is the evolution of life they've created, of synthetic life they've created, and then reconciling what it means to give birth to synthetic civilizations and have them flourish and not be afraid of them, while then coexisting and exploring and solving, and embracing the frailties of human life, right? And that synthetic life don't necessarily have. That's interesting, but we're not going to get that resolved in one episode.
Okay, and it still suffers from the same thing that I complained about weeks ago, which is that every character has nefarious intentions. There's like Elnor is the only good person in this show, I think. It's like everyone is like constantly double crossing each other and just sort of like straight up lying to each other. It's too much. Like, I understand like that's a Star Trek hallmark to have someone be that sort of character profile, but when everyone's that character profile, it just devalues the entire use of that narrative structure.
So predictions for the next episode, for the ultimate episode.
I will be disappointed. That's my prediction.
So one thing you left out about the summary was that Picard tells the crew that he has a terminal illness, and I think that that's going to come into play in this last episode. He basically said goodbye to a couple characters already, and I think whatever Brent Spiner's character has invented, this, I forget what he calls it.
It's mind transfer.
Yeah,
perfected mind transfer.
It's not not a golem. Does he call it a golem?
Oh yeah. She calls it a golem. Yeah, like a template to implant your brain, human brain, a dying brain, into a body.
I think that's Picard. I think Picard's brain is going to be transferred into the golem, and Picard will become a superhero.
I don't think that would be the case, because you got to have Patrick Stewart, and Patrick Stewart can't act any less frail, right? He is old, right? And I think the offer might be put on the table for him to put his brain in the golem, Professor X style, right? X-Men 3 and the style, but he will turn it down because it's a classic sci-fi trope. Mortality is what is a strength in humanity, knowing there is an end, coming to terms with that. And that thematically works really well for Picard. And his strength is to turn down immortality. And maybe the synthetics see that as, wow, that could be a strength. We don't need to destroy humanity. We can coexist. We will exist forever, but we don't need to actively destroy these civilizations.
I think they set up the Picard's illness so that they can kill the character, but yet we know that there's a season 2, and so I'm imagining that he is in this golem form and he's doing voiceover work, and it's more of like a CG kind of thing.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, that's worse than the Westworld. Anthony Hopkins dying in season 1 and coming back as a projection in the robot mind in season 2.
Yeah, like Alec Guinness in Empire, man. It's like it could happen. It could happen. It would be a lot less work for a 90-year-old Patrick Stewart, and they would be able to continue as many seasons as they want with a dead guy who they've already set up, is going to die.
Also, the name of the show.
Exactly. Yeah.
Soji at the end. Who are you? I am Soji Picard.
This is
Ray
weirdly making
Skywalker.
me more depressed than anything else we've talked about on this show. So it's fair to say that the shine is off of the show for all of us at this point.
I don't know. This episode opened with some of the best warp effects I've seen in any sci-fi series ever, because they're going at like super warp.
And I feel like
light speed skipping.
Yeah.
The one adjustment that I've really liked is the evolution of the interface on ships and stuff. And I know that's been around for a while, but I've really enjoyed that. It does feel like the future.
I feel like thematically, and maybe it's they introduced the Borg so early, and the Borg, as established in First Contact, they saw data as perfection. They saw a fully synthetic life form as perfection. Organics was just a halfway measure to propagate and to grow. I feel like that must tie in the last episode for there to be any type of satisfaction. There's so many, like, again, I'm not against this thesis that, you know, Shaban and the showrunners and the writers have for the show, like what is First Contact like for synthetics and exploring that. But Star Trek has given us so much in that realm before, you know, not just Measure of a Man, but in First Contact. You know, you have 7 of 9. Well, you also have, I mean, one of the defining tropes of Star Trek is the non-human synthetic character learning to be human. And the question of why would a synthetic, why does Data want to be human? Why does Spock as that archetype want to be more human? Why does the Doctor on Voyager as a hologram want to be more human? That's what's being challenged here, right? Thesis seems to be, no, you don't need to be like these lesser beings. You can be your own thing, and you can enter this new world with this invitation. And that they need to come to terms with that and bring in the Borg, bring in holograms, bring in all the ways that Star Trek has explored this in the past.
You know, I would just point out that whereas Data always wanted to be more human, the thing that always got in his way was always that pesky emotion chip. And so, like, that's like maybe that was like one of the original theses. I mean, Lore obviously having that ability, and we haven't, like, certainly the evil Soji is capable of emotions. I don't know to what extent the other androids on that world are, but
capable, or maybe that's just the way it's portrayed. Maybe that's the extreme logic of survival, right? And maybe the actress is just portraying it as emotion, or it's being read by us as empathetic creatures as emotion. Don't know. Yeah. There will be a second season. I hope they talk about holograms. They laid out this whole thing with Rios on a ship full of holograms, right? Also kind of like synthetic creatures. Moriarty in TNG was essentially a hologram that sought to be a sentient, independent being. These are all themes that could be tied into whatever, you know, this whole idea of synthetic life First Contact, not just the mechanical body, but the intellectual one as well. One more episode, guys.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
We've gone this far, and I think Patrick Stewart is confirmed to come back for next season. So, you know, it's safe to say Picard won't die off. Definitely not in name.
We shall see.
Yeah. Any last words, last thoughts, last predictions? Kishore? All good? Alrighty.
Not all good, but no more predictions.
All bad things must come to an end.
Oh boy.
Yes. Do you want to tease the interview that's coming up on this back half of the podcast?
Oh, that already happened, Kishore. We already had a pause there.
I'm living in the future.
You're living. Thanks for watching the episode. We'll hopefully be back next week, and we're going to figure out any of the technical difficulties we had on our end on podcasting. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for enjoying the podcast, and hopefully you guys are staying safe, washing your hands, and finding ways to be productive, pass the time, and kind of be mindful of each other.
Hear, hear.
All right.
No outro this week, right?
No outro. Yeah. You know what? Maybe there'll be an outro.
Oh,
Maybe
you're
there won't.
going to magically make one appear.
We're going to magically make one appear or not. It's been a long episode, but if there's no outro, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.